Imagine being forced to surrender your life to the man everyone says is cold and incapable of love. But the truth will turn everything upside down. My father forced me to marry a blind farmer, and on the first night, I discovered something no one could ever have imagined. Evelyn Grace had always considered herself a girl of dreams. She grew up among the fields of her father's old estate, but she never knew the freedom she had imagined. At 19, she already felt the bitter taste of discipline and her father's coldness on her skin. From a young age, Robert Grace was tough and ambitious, incapable of being satisfied with anything that didn't involve prestige or profit. Evelyn had learned early on that her happiness didn't matter, that her heart was of no consequence. Mornings began before the sun rose. She woke to the sound of roosters crowing, helped tidy the house, took care of the household chores, and rushed through the hallways to obey her father's orders. Every detail had to be perfect, or else she would face harsh looks, silent reprimands, and entire days of tension. A poorly ironed dress, a distracted gesture, any mistake could ignite a contained fury that ate away at her self-esteem. Evelyn remembered the times she tried to smile to please her father, only for him to furrow his brow as if her life depended on his constant vigilance. "There's no room for weakness here," he would say, and she would swallow her tears, learning to live on the edge of her own breath. Evelyn loved to dream, but only in secret. She sat by the window in her room, watching the wind play with the leaves of the trees, imagining a world beyond the walls of the mansion. She dreamed of books she could never buy, music she couldn't play aloud, and a love that seemed to exist only in the stories she read in secret. She wanted to laugh without fear, hug without guilt, walk barefoot through the fields, feeling the cold earth beneath her feet. But these desires were seen as dangerous luxuries, and she learned to keep them locked deep in her heart. In recent months, Evelyn began to realize that she was being treated like a bargaining chip. Conversations between her father, lawyers, and neighbors reached her ears, and words like honor, debts, and business sounded like sentences. She understood that at any moment she could be given away as a solution to problems she didn't fully comprehend, and the feeling of helplessness became almost physical, a constant tightness in her chest. Trying to rebel was useless. Looks, gestures, and unsaid words reminded her that in her father's house nothing was allowed but obedience. Every gesture carried weight. Every word had to comply with what her father considered right. Any sign of her own will could be reprimanded. Evelyn, who had only ever wanted to be heard and understood, learned to hide her emotions, locking them away in an invisible safe inside her chest. Even joy became suspicious, and laughter was rare, whispered, almost forbidden. Still, there were fleeting moments of freedom. Walking alone through the fields, smelling the wet earth after the rain, Evelyn allowed herself to imagine that her life could be different. She painted possible futures in her mind, marrying for love, having children she could love without fear, laughing until she was tired. But the harsh reality always returned to remind her that her body, her youth, and her very life were at the disposal of her father's plans. The climax of this fear came on a grey afternoon when her father abruptly entered her room, holding a thick envelope and wearing the hardest expression she had ever seen. Evelyn looked up and felt her heart race, as if it were about to leap from her throat. "Evelyn," he said, his voice firm, each word cutting the air like a blade. "Our time is running out. You are going to marry." She swallowed hard, a pang of dread rising in her chest. "But who?" she stammered, trying to hide her terror. "It doesn't matter now," her father replied, moving closer and placing the envelope on the table. "Just know that the man is willing to offer some money to settle our debts. This will ensure that our family doesn't lose everything. There's no room for discussion. You will obey." Evelyn felt the world spinning around her. A marriage. to a man she didn't know, to a destiny she had never chosen. Her entire universe of dreams and hopes seemed shattered before her. The feeling of helplessness surrounded her, a thick cloud that consumed each breath, each thought. She wanted to scream, run, escape, but she knew none of that would be allowed. She knew that any reaction would be seen as defiance, and her father wouldn't hesitate to punish her. So she just sat on the edge of the bed, her trembling hands clasped together, trying to find courage where there seemed to be none. She remembered her mother, who had died when she was only 7, leaving a cold silence that her father filled only with orders and demands. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and felt the life she knew crumbling. Each dream seemed crushed, each hope extinguished. But even amidst the fear and pain, a thin thread of resistance emerged. Evelyn Grace still carried something no one could take from her, the ability to dream. Perhaps the life her father planned for her was cruel and unjust, but within her there was the quiet certainty that somewhere there was a path where she could be free, loved, and happy. And so, surrounded by the silence of her room, Evelyn realized that her destiny had been set, but her heart still refused to give up. Even though the world had decided for her, her essence, her inner strength, and her hope remained intact, waiting for the moment to rise up. The days passed like slow shadows over Evelyn Grace's life. Each morning seemed the same as the last, the crowing of roosters, the smell of wet earth, the silent corridors of the mansion, and her father watching, always alert, always judging. Evelyn followed her mechanical routine, cleaning, tidying, obeying, but within her, a growing unrest spread like a silent storm. The marriage announced by Robert Grace still hung over her like a sentence, and the unknown, on the other side of this unwelcome fate, terrified her. Her father had never revealed the name of her future husband. He had only said she would marry a man capable of helping with the family debts, someone willing to offer some money. No details about his personality, appearance, or character were shared. Evelyn only knew she would have to obey. And the more she tried to mentally prepare herself, the more fear rooted itself in her chest, growing with every rumor that reached her ears. Rumors began to surround her, whispered by the housemaids, neighbors, even strangers crossing the fields nearby. They spoke of Nathaniel Hart, the blind farmer, secluded on a large property far from the village. They said he was cold, distant, incapable of love, that no one had ever gotten close to his heart. Some stories were exaggerated, others so dark they made Evelyn tremble with fear. She imagined silent nights, empty stares, a life without joy. The sense that she was being handed over to an invisible prison grew with each passing day, making it impossible to think of safety or comfort. Each day leading up to the wedding was a torment of anticipation. Evelyn walked through the fields trying to escape her own thoughts, but they followed her like a constant shadow. The scent of the wet earth, which once made her dream of freedom, now only reminded her of the fate that was fast approaching. She tried to imagine Nathaniel Hart, but all she could create were dark images. A serious, taciturn, indifferent man. Someone who could never understand her delicate, dreamy heart. On the night before the ceremony, Evelyn sat by the window, watching the moonlight reflected on the fields. She tried to find some courage, some comfort. She thought of her mother, who had passed away when she was just 7. Her soft voice, the warm embrace, the loving maternal warmth. Everything had been replaced by the cold silence of her father, filled only with orders, demands, and expectations. A deep emptiness consumed her courage, making every thought a battle against the fear. The wedding day arrived, shrouded in a grey mist. Evelyn woke before dawn, dressing in the gown her father had chosen, plain, unremarkable, but accentuating the delicacy he so tightly controlled. She walked through the mansion's hallways, feeling the weight of all the invisible gazes that, to her, judged every gesture, every step. There were no emotional farewells, only the cold silence of Robert Grace, measuring each movement with relentless eyes. The journey to the church was silent. The carriage cut through the path between fields and forests, and Evelyn kept her head down, trying to control her breathing and stifle the suffocating fear. The landscape that had once inspired her now reinforced the sense of imprisonment. Tall trees, long shadows, the outside world seeming distant, inaccessible. When they reached the church, Evelyn felt the overwhelming weight of reality. All the neighbors, relatives, and onlookers stared at her as though she were an object about to be delivered. Each gaze carried expectation, judgment, reminding her that she had no choice. She took a deep breath, trying to find courage, but her heart seemed trapped in a knot. The ceremony began, slow and solemn. The priest spoke words Evelyn could hardly hear, so focused was she on controlling the tremor in her hands and the anxiety consuming her. Each step toward the altar seemed to strip away a piece of her freedom. Each repeated word sounded like invisible chains. She realized that at that moment, her life was entirely out of her hands. When she was finally presented to Nathaniel Hart, the man who would be her husband, Evelyn hesitated. He didn't look at her, he couldn't, but his firm, upright posture conveyed a strange security, almost demanding respect. The first impression left her uneasy, mixing fear with curiosity. She felt a chill run down her spine, but also a strange sense of mystery, as though behind the rumors and his blindness there was something she still didn't understand. When she said the "I do" that would seal her life, Evelyn felt the crushing weight of every shattered dream. The idea of loving someone she had never truly known, of living beside a stranger, of giving her heart without guarantee, was almost unbearable. Tears threatened to fall, but she held them back as she always had, hiding them so no one would see her vulnerability. Even in the silence of the church, surrounded by impassive people, Evelyn noticed something curious. No matter how much fear she felt, there was a thin thread of resistance within her, a thread that told her that, despite everything, her essence, her capacity to dream and long for love and freedom, remained intact. Perhaps her life had been taken from her at that moment, but her heart continued on its own path, insisting on not being fully tamed. When the ceremony ended and the silence returned to the church, Evelyn felt small, fragile, and utterly alone. But at the same time, a spark of hope appeared, silent, almost invisible. Even forced to obey, she still carried with her the desire to be free, to one day love and be loved truly, and perhaps even to discover what Nathaniel Hart hid behind the reputation of a cold, reclusive, blind farmer. The weight of the secret, the uncertainty, and the fear remained, and Evelyn knew the coming days would be challenging. But deep down, a part of her still dreamed, believing that the future could hold something more than mere obligation and suffering. And it was this small flame, almost invisible, that sustained her as the church gates closed behind her and the unknown path stretched out before her. After the ceremony and the brief celebration in the village, Evelyn Grace could hardly believe that her life was about to change so abruptly. One of Nathaniel Hart's servants, a calm and steady man, had been assigned to escort her to the estate. He helped her into the cart, guiding it steadily as Nathaniel remained silent, seated beside her. Evelyn couldn't see him clearly in the fading evening light, but she felt the firm presence of her husband, a silent security that contrasted with the apprehension burning in her chest. The journey to the farm was long, passing trails lined with tall trees, vast fields, and shadows that seemed to embrace her. The cart creaked under the weight of the wheels on the uneven earth, and each jolt reminded her that she was now completely handed over to a fate she hadn't chosen. Evelyn tried to imagine Nathaniel Hart, but all she could conjure were dark images, a serious, taciturn, distant man, incapable of ever understanding her delicate, dreamy heart. When the cart finally stopped, Evelyn remained silent for a few seconds, unable to believe what she was seeing. Before her stood a massive estate, far larger than anything she had ever imagined. Endless fields, well-maintained wooden fences, wide gardens, and an imposing house that seemed to touch the sky. Her heart raced, a mixture of astonishment and disbelief taking over her. Never in her life had she felt as if she were facing something so grand, so far removed from her own reality. The servant helped her dismount carefully, guiding her along the stone path toward the house. Even without sight, Nathaniel moved with precision and confidence, avoiding any stumble and exuding an unexpected sense of security. Evelyn was impressed, not just by the vastness of the property, but by the calm and control that emanated from him. The man everyone said was cold and incapable of love was, at that moment, almost captivating in his silent way of moving. As they entered the house, Evelyn noticed the contrast between the size of the estate and the welcoming simplicity of the interior. Well-crafted wooden furniture, discreet tapestries, and an atmosphere that exuded comfort and care. Nathaniel led her to the main bedroom, spacious but decorated with delicate taste, without excessive ostentation. Every detail seemed thoughtfully designed to welcome, not to impress. "Here it is," Nathaniel said, his voice calm, firm, but soft, full of care and attention. "This will be your room." Evelyn felt a strange chill run down her spine. Expectation, fear, and curiosity mixed in a tight knot in her chest. She watched Nathaniel closely, noticing the precise way he moved. The wooden cane he carried in his hand, lightly resting on the ground, seemed an extension of himself, every touch conveying security and confidence. He didn't look at her, but it seemed he could sense every movement she made, every held breath, every hesitation. "Nathaniel," she murmured, almost voiceless. Before she could finish, he raised his hand gently, interrupting her without the slightest sign of haste or aggression. "Don't worry," he said slowly. "Everything will be done calmly. Nothing will be forced." Evelyn drew a deep breath, though a lingering trace of fear still gripped her. Her eyes fixed on the wooden cane, and a nearly childlike worry escaped her. "Please, don't hurt me," she said, her voice trembling. I don't want to suffer." There was a moment of silence, one that seemed to stretch across the room. And then Nathaniel replied with a steadiness and conviction that surprised her. "I would never harm you, Evelyn." His voice was deep, but carried tenderness. "I believe the only harm that surrounded you was inside the very house you came from, not here. Here, you will be safe." Those words struck Evelyn's mind like a lightning bolt. She had never imagined hearing someone speak with such conviction and care about her own safety. Fear began to mix with something new, a timid trust, hesitant but real. Nathaniel guided her to a chair, and they sat close, keeping a respectful distance, though without coldness. He began to speak about books, music he enjoyed, childhood memories, trips he never took, and the simple dreams he nurtured. Every word carried courtesy, sensitivity, and a gentleness that unsettled Evelyn. She had never imagined that behind the cold, distant aura, the rumors that circulated in the village, there could exist a man capable of listening so attentively, of perceiving every nuance of expression, every tremor in her voice. The conversation went on, with Evelyn growing more and more intrigued. For a moment, she forgot the fear that had dominated her since the journey, forgetting the forced marriage and the dark rumors. Nathaniel's presence no longer intimidated her. On the contrary, it awakened in her a subtle desire to know him, to understand the man everyone claimed was incapable of feeling. As night advanced, Nathaniel rose and, with care, extended his hand to help her walk to the bed. Every step was accompanied with attention, every movement of hers perceived. He tucked her in gently, adjusted her pillow, checked the soft light in the room. Everything was done with a patience and precision that left her astonished. Evelyn had never felt so closely observed and, at the same time, so respected. "Sleep well, Evelyn," he said before withdrawing. "Tomorrow will be another day, and everything will be different." She closed her eyes, feeling her heart beat in a way it hadn't since she had learned of the marriage. It wasn't only fear, but also expectation and a small spark of hope. For the first time since surrendering to her father's plans, Evelyn realized that perhaps this mysterious, blind, reclusive man might be different from what the rumors told. In the silence of the night, Evelyn Grace understood something she had never imagined. It would not be Nathaniel's blindness that defined what they could become together, but rather the way both chose to deal with their hearts. A fragile, timid but real thread of hope lit within her. The promise that life, cruel as it had been until then, might still surprise her with something unexpected. That night, for the first time, Evelyn felt that darkness was not only fear, it could also be the beginning of something capable of illuminating her soul. The days on the farm began slowly, as though time there followed another rhythm, more measured, heavier, but also purer. Evelyn Grace still felt out of place. Each dawn was a mixture of anxiety and expectation. She woke to the crowing roosters, but unlike her father's house, there were no shouts or judgmental stares. There was only the sound of nature, and in the distance, Nathaniel's firm presence as he moved carefully through the house and across the fields, leaning on the wooden cane he handled with impressive precision. That morning, one of Nathaniel's men arrived with a cart to take them to different parts of the vast property, showing the extent of the farm and explaining the details of each corner. Evelyn couldn't contain her awe. She had never imagined that something so immense could exist, and every stretch of land seemed to carry stories she did not yet know. "This is our cattle pasture," said Samuel, his voice steady and experienced, pointing toward the wide fields. "There's plenty of work, but everything follows a steady routine." Evelyn glanced at Nathaniel, who remained beside her, and felt a surge of curiosity. "Do you live here alone?" she asked softly, almost timidly. Nathaniel set his cane against the ground, drew a deep breath, and answered with calm firmness, "Yes. I inherited this place from my parents, who passed away about 10 years ago. I never imagined I would marry. I thought I'd spend my entire life alone on this farm. But when your father fell into crisis and needed help, I offered myself. I thought maybe, at last, I could have a family." Evelyn felt her chest tighten. There was a raw honesty in his words, a blend of sorrow and hope that touched something deep within her heart. "So, you truly wanted to help me?" she whispered, hesitant. "Yes," Nathaniel replied, with the same firmness and gentleness that marked his every gesture. "I believe we can build something new if we both choose to." He paused, resting lightly on his cane. Tears threatened to fall, but Evelyn held them back. No one had ever said anything like that to her, with such care and certainty. For the first time since arriving at the farm, she felt safe, even though she was surrounded by an unknown and overwhelming world. The following days were a mixture of work and quiet discoveries. Evelyn began to learn about rural life, milking cows, tending the orchard, managing the workers, and organizing daily tasks. Each of Nathaniel's gestures, even without looking at her, carried attention and care. He guided her with his voice, corrected her movements gently, always respecting her space, her time, her will. One late afternoon, she walked through the barn with Isabel, one of the farm's oldest workers, helping organize tools and feed some animals. "Nathaniel trusts you a great deal," Isabel remarked with a warm smile, wiping her hands still dirty from the earth. "It's not just anyone he allows near him, especially someone who only just arrived." Evelyn felt a faint blush rise to her cheeks. "He's different from what I imagined," she admitted, almost in a whisper. He doesn't seem like the cold man everyone in the village talks about. Isabel nodded, watching the young woman with a maternal gaze. That's right, dear. Many people are afraid of him without ever really knowing him. He does seem serious, yes, but those who know him well understand that he has a huge heart. And you'll see, he cares in a way very few people do. Evelyn sighed, gazing at the fields bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. I just hope I'll be able to adapt, she said, a trace of nervousness in her voice. You will, Isabel replied, her tone firm yet tender at the same time. No one here expects perfection, only honesty and the willingness to learn. And Nathaniel, well, he can tell when someone truly cares. Evelyn felt a wave of relief and gratitude. For the first time, it seemed there were people around her who understood her situation, who could help her face this life so different from the one she had known. Thank you, Isabel, she murmured, lowering her gaze. I feel like I can trust you. Always, my dear, Isabel answered, giving her shoulder a gentle touch. And remember, you're not alone here. And in that moment, surrounded by the scent of the earth, the lowing of cattle, and the golden light of late afternoon, Evelyn realized that even in a vast and unfamiliar place, there was room for care, for protection, and even for something she thought she had lost, hope. The morning dawned bright, with a clear sky and birdsong filling the air. Evelyn had decided she would do something special. For days, she had been thinking about how she might show Nathaniel that, although they had only been married a short time, she truly wanted to grow closer to him, to create a moment of lightness between them. She prepared a basket with fresh fruit, bread, cheese, and a few treats she was sure he would enjoy, even without ever tasting them herself. She trusted her instincts, guided by the careful attention he showed to every detail of the farm. When she reached the garden, she found Nathaniel standing still, leaning on his wooden cane, his eyes closed as he absorbed the sound of the wind and the birds. He seemed almost to be meditating, deeply focused on the calm of that space. Evelyn's heart began to race. He looked so serene, so attuned to the world around him, that just being in his presence made her both nervous and excited. Nathaniel, she called, her voice soft, hesitant, yet full of expectation. He turned, steadying himself with the cane, and a serene smile spread across his face. Evelyn, he replied with that calm strength that always surprised her. What brings you here so early? I thought that maybe we could spend the day together, she said, walking toward him slowly, the picnic basket in her hands. I prepared something for us. Nathaniel tilted his head, intrigued. For us? He repeated with a trace of disbelief, though his voice carried a warmth that made her smile. Yes, Evelyn said, lowering her eyes for a moment. I know we're still distant as husband and wife, but I wanted to try to change that. With care, he set his cane aside and held out his hand. Evelyn felt the chance for genuine connection. She placed her hand in his, sensing the strength, the warmth, and the steady reassurance that radiated from him. Nathaniel didn't pull away. On the contrary, he seemed to lean into the touch, letting the distance between them shrink, even if only a little. Let's sit over here, she suggested, leading him to a corner of the garden where the grass was soft and the fragrance of flowers mingled with the freshness of the air. I think you'll like it. They settled down, the basket between them, and Evelyn began serving small portions of fruit and bread. With tender care, she offered Nathaniel the first slice of apple. He accepted, and she guided his hand to his mouth, laughing softly when he smiled as he tasted it. Did you prepare all this by yourself? He asked, his voice touched with surprise and a hint of amusement. Yes, Evelyn replied with a smile. I wanted to do something nice for you. For us. A comfortable silence followed, filled only with the sounds of nature. She felt a sudden boldness and leaned a little closer, studying his face, wondering what it would be like to touch his lips. Nathaniel seemed to sense her tension, her longing for connection, and he leaned toward her gently. The kiss was light, tender, hesitant, but full of meaning, the first silent promise of affection they had shared since life had bound them together. Evelyn drew back slightly, still holding his hand, and spoke with heartfelt honesty. "I remembered what you said a few days ago about wanting a family, about believing you could marry someday. I'll admit, I was afraid. Afraid of who my father might choose for me, afraid of losing my dreams. But now I see he chose someone I never would have imagined. Someone who's changed my heart." Nathaniel tightened his grip on her hand, their fingers intertwining, his voice steady yet soft. "Evelyn," he said, his words calm and resolute, "I never thought I'd find someone who could show me what it means to share a life. I thought I would remain alone, without a family, without love, until you came." Her heart raced, and a shy smile curved her lips. Almost without realizing it, she leaned closer, her lips brushing his, feeling the shared breath, the steady, protective presence. Nathaniel did not retreat. Instead, he gently guided her closer, their lips meeting fully. The kiss began timid and uncertain, but slowly deepened, carrying the weight of emotions held back for so long. They spent hours talking, about dreams, childhood memories, fears, and quiet hopes, each word weaving a stronger bond between them. Evelyn served him small pieces of bread and cheese, and each time he tasted one, he smiled, savoring not just the food, but the care behind each gesture. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Evelyn rested her head on his shoulder. Nathaniel wrapped his arm around her, steady, protective, yet gentle, and together they contemplated the quiet garden, breathing in the peace of a moment won through care and mutual tenderness. In that instant, Evelyn realized that though there was still so much to discover about him and about herself, something fundamental had shifted. The fear, the anxiety, the distance of an arranged marriage had given way to a new feeling. The possibility that love could be born out of silence, delicate gestures, and cautious hearts. And in the midst of soft laughter, exchanged glances, and tender touches, she felt for the very first time that maybe, just maybe, she could fully trust this man who, though blind, saw the essence of her more clearly than anyone ever had. After that picnic in the garden, Evelyn carried within her a calm she had never known before. For the first time since arriving at the farm, the world seemed, if only for a few hours, like a safe place. Nathaniel was at her side, and she could hear the distant birdsong, feel the wind drifting through the trees, and imagine that perhaps it was possible to build something true between them. The days that followed unfolded in small routines of affection, walks through the fields, conversations about the past, and unspoken plans for the future. Every act of care from Nathaniel, every smile, every gentle word deepened the trust and intimacy blooming between them. Evelyn felt alive in a way she had never experienced before. That afternoon, Nathaniel walked alone through the garden, the solid wooden cane steady in his hands, absorbing the sounds and scents around him. Calm yet purposeful steps traced the outline of the house and the trees, while he paused from time to time to listen to the wind or the rustle of leaves. There was something almost meditative about his presence, the serenity of a man who knows every inch of his life, even without being able to see it. Then the heavy sound of boots on the dirt road shattered the peace. A man was striding determinedly along the path, and Nathaniel's heart tightened the moment he recognized the figure drawing near. Robert Grace, his father-in-law. The man's steps were firm, his expression hard, and his eyes carried the promise of conflict. Between his fingers, he clutched papers, bills, and a restrained fury that was seconds away from exploding. "Nathaniel," Robert announced, his voice thick with authority echoing across the garden. "We need to talk. What was agreed on isn't enough. My family needs more, and you know exactly what I'm talking about." Nathaniel stood tall, unshaken, the cane by his side, each step calculated, each word measured. "I've given you what was agreed upon, Robert. Nothing more will be handed over." The father-in-law advanced, impatient, and with a sudden, abrupt gesture, grabbed Nathaniel by the shirt, giving him a rough shake. "You don't understand," Robert shouted, rage vibrating in every syllable. "If you don't give me more money, I'll take her away." Nathaniel felt the pull on his shirt, the pressure of Robert's hands trying to dominate him. Even blind, every touch carried weight and intent, and his body reacted with firmness, unyielding, yet radiating absolute alertness. "You're mistaken if you think you can intimidate me," Nathaniel said, his voice steady, slicing through the air with authority. "I've done my part. There's nothing left to negotiate." Robert took a step closer, his breathing heavy, his eyes flashing with anger. "That's not how this works," he roared, grabbing the shirt again, this time with even more force. "You gave me what was promised, but it's not enough. I won't stand by while my daughter is trapped here without freedom." "Trapped?" Nathaniel countered sharply, tension rising in his tone. "She is not your property, Robert, and here no one threatens Evelyn." His voice was firm, every syllable carrying control over the situation, but also warning. Robert shoved Nathaniel with his shoulder, a harsh, furious gesture. "I am her father," he shouted, "and if you don't give me more money, I will take her away, no matter the cost." Just then, the sound of hurried footsteps cut through the air. Evelyn was running across the garden, calling out Nathaniel's name, her heart pounding, adrenaline surging. She stopped just a few steps away, taking in the scene. Her aggressive father, Nathaniel, standing firm, but being shoved and grabbed. A cold fear raced down her spine, but something stronger ignited inside her. Courage. "Father!" Evelyn cried out, her voice trembling but charged with determination. "Let him go this instant. I will not allow you to hurt Nathaniel." Robert froze, stunned, as though he hadn't expected his daughter's bravery. His eyes narrowed, disbelief momentarily overtaking his fury. "Evelyn, you—" he began, his voice faltering before hardening again. "You didn't even want to marry. You should be grateful I found this man for you, even blind, even without knowing he was a millionaire. Money doesn't define a man, Robert." Evelyn cut him off, her voice now steady, each word rising with strength from her heart. "What matters is true love, the devotion of a man who respects me, who protects me, who chooses to be with me for who I am, not for what I can bring or what he owns. Unlike you." Her father was left speechless, his face reddening with rage and frustration. He grabbed Nathaniel's shirt again, trying to push him, but Evelyn's husband stood tall, every movement deliberate, every word precise. "Robert, no one threatens Evelyn here. I've fulfilled the agreement. That is enough." "You think that's enough?" the father shouted, his voice now hoarse. "She is my daughter, and she will do as I say." "Not anymore," Evelyn replied, stepping closer, her heart racing but her courage unshaken. "I won't let you hurt Nathaniel, nor will I let you manipulate me. He's not here out of obligation or convenience. He's here for me, for true love. And if you think I can be bought with money, you're wrong." Nathaniel moved toward her, taking her hand firmly, offering reassurance without a word. The strength of his touch, his presence, gave Evelyn all she needed to face her father. Robert clenched his fists, his face crimson with rage, his breathing ragged. He was about to lunge again when firm footsteps echoed across the garden. Two of the estate's security men, large, imposing figures, appeared silently from the sides. In one swift motion they surrounded Robert, seizing his arms and shoulders. "Let me go," he roared, struggling in vain against their iron grip. "I demand she come with me." "You're not the one in charge here," Nathaniel said, his voice firm and laden with authority, each syllable cutting through the hot garden air. "She is safe, and I will not allow any attack or threat." Evelyn felt a wave of relief and power wash over her. For the first time, she was standing beside someone who truly protected her. She looked at her father, now straining uselessly against the guards, his expression twisted with impotence and fury. This isn't over!" Robert snarled as he was dragged out of the garden, the guards' heavy footsteps echoing along the entry path. "Day, you'll regret this." "You can try," Nathaniel replied, still holding Evelyn's hand, his presence unwavering. "But here, you have no power." The silence that followed was heavy, but not with threat, with relief. Evelyn drew a deep breath, her body trembling lightly, yet her heart felt lighter. Without warning, tears streamed down her cheeks, and she leaned into Nathaniel, sobbing softly. "I'm sorry," she whispered through tears, her voice shaking, "for making you go through this." Nathaniel leaned gently toward her, his hand steady as it touched her face, brushing away strands of sweat-dampened hair and tears. "You were incredibly brave," he told her, his voice soft yet strong, radiating confidence. "Standing up to your father is something very few could do. I'm proud of you, Evelyn." She lifted her face, her eyes red, and spoke with sincerity, every word weighed with emotion. "Everything I said is true. Nathaniel, I don't care about the possessions you own or what the world sees as wealth. You gave me something money could never buy. Safety, respect, real love, something my father never knew how to offer me." Nathaniel held her face more firmly, his thumbs gently brushing her tear-soaked cheeks. "Then know this," he replied, steady yet tender at once. "You have nothing to apologize for. What you did was brave, and more than that, it was real, and I am by your side, always." Evelyn rested her head on his shoulder again, feeling his strong protective embrace, the warmth that radiated safety. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, she felt truly free, loved, and secure, not because of money, status, or any obligation, but because of what truly mattered, Nathaniel's heart, the heart that saw every part of her, understood her fears, and honored her courage. The tears kept falling, but they were no longer just of fear or frustration. They were tears of relief, gratitude, and love. And there, in that silent embrace, Evelyn understood something she would never forget. That true power did not lie with those who owned wealth, but with those who knew how to love with courage, patience, and devotion. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in golden and rosy hues, while the gentle breeze of the garden wrapped around them both. Evelyn sighed, feeling every muscle relax, every fear dissolve, while Nathaniel remained there, steady, protective, silently devoted, showing her that, at last, they had both found their safe haven. After the confrontation with her father, life on the ranch took on a new rhythm, lighter, truer. The fear that once shadowed Evelyn had vanished, replaced by trust, courage, and a newfound sense of belonging. Each day began with small rituals of care, Nathaniel preparing the coffee and offering her the first cup, Evelyn smiling at the tenderness with which he handled the utensils, his cane always resting nearby. What had once been a quiet and distant routine transformed into shared intimacy. Their closeness deepened with every simple gesture. On their walks through the fields, Nathaniel held her hand firmly, but without haste, allowing Evelyn to feel the security in his touch. On summer afternoons, they sat by the lake speaking of dreams, childhood memories, and plans for the future, while sunlight glimmered in her hair and warmed his face. Every glance, every shared smile cemented the certainty that they were building something solid, genuine, and lasting. One morning, Evelyn felt something different, a blend of emotion and surprise she could not ignore. With trembling hands, she approached Nathaniel, who was in the garden listening to the wind and the birdsong, as he so often did, absorbing the world with the rare sensitivity only he possessed. "Nathaniel, she began, her voice shaky, yet brimming with joy. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was profound, but not tense. Nathaniel stood still for a few seconds, taking in the news, and then, with a smile that lit his whole face, he slowly moved closer, carefully taking her hands in his. "Evelyn, that's incredible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. We're going to have a family." She smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks, this time out of happiness. For the first time, she felt that every hardship of the past had been worth it, that every moment of fear and uncertainty had carved the path to this instant of pure joy. Pregnancy brought new routines and discoveries. Evelyn felt more connected to life, to her body, to her own heart. Nathaniel, though blind, moved toward her with constant care, asking how she felt, helping her settle into the benches in the garden or the chairs on the porch, and always speaking to the baby. "Hello, little one," he would whisper, his voice soft, as he gently touched her growing belly. "I'm your father. I'll take care of you, even before you arrive." Evelyn laughed, touched to the core, feeling the love that overflowed between them. Every movement of the baby, every spark of life within her, was celebrated with words, tenderness, and a quiet devotion that made her feel safe, cherished, profoundly loved. There were days of exhaustion, of nausea and discomfort, but Nathaniel was always there, ready to ease her suffering. He spoke to the child, told little stories, described how life on the ranch was full of beauty and how every corner would be a place of safety and love. Evelyn was wrapped in a peace she had never thought possible, realizing that even in darkness, Nathaniel could see the essence of everything that truly mattered. As they walked through the fields, Nathaniel held her hand, attuned to every step, every heartbeat, every breath they shared. Evelyn, in turn, felt more deeply connected to him through every touch, every sweet, careful word. They spoke of the future, of how they wanted to raise their child to know the value of respect, courage, and true love. "Tagay, he'll grow up knowing that love is not measured by what you own," Evelyn said, stroking his hand, "but by what you feel, what you protect, and what you hold dear." Nathaniel smiled, leaning slightly to caress her face with tenderness. "And he'll learn that from you, Evelyn. You showed me that courage and love walk hand in hand, and now he'll have the best example in the world." As the months went by, the pregnancy only strengthened their bond. Each night, as they lay down, Nathaniel would rest his hand on her belly, feeling the baby's movements, whispering little songs, stories, and promises of protection. Evelyn would close her eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand against her, imagining the life they would build together, a life filled with love, laughter, and shared devotion. And so, through gestures of tenderness, long conversations, secret smiles, and quiet moments of intimacy, Evelyn realized that the life she once thought imposed upon her, one of obligations and fear, had transformed into a path of true love. Nathaniel could not see, but he felt everything with such intensity, and she in turn had learned that love does not need eyes to be seen. It only needs a heart to be felt. When the baby was finally born, the ranch garden filled with laughter and emotion. Evelyn held the child in her arms, and Nathaniel, with trembling hands and tearful eyes, touched the tiny face, feeling life pulse beneath his fingers. "Welcome to the world, my son," Nathaniel whispered, his voice breaking. "I'll protect you always, just as I did with your mother." Evelyn, smiling through tears, rested her head against his shoulder, feeling that every fear, every distance, every pain of the past had given way to peace, love, and hope. For the first time, she knew she had found light, even in darkness. And that light was Nathaniel, her husband, the father of her child, and the love of her life. In the stillness of the ranch, amidst birdsong and the soft wind whispering through the trees, Evelyn thought to herself, "It was in the dark that I found the light. And that light is the love that completes me, protects me, and now illuminates our future."